Ms. Shames.
Chairman Towns, I'm pleased to be here today to discuss the Department of Agriculture's progress in addressing long-standing civil rights issues. As you know, for years, USDA has been the focus of reviews into allegations of discrimination against minorities and women, both in its programs and in its workforce. Many, including the Congress, the Civil Rights Commission, the EEOC, USDA's own Inspector General, as well as GAO, have provided constructive analysis and made recommendations to improve its civil rights efforts. Unfortunately, based on GAO's work to date, we find that USDA's management of its civil rights efforts continues to be deficient. Specifically, we found persistent problems in resolving discrimination complaints, unreliable reports on minority participation in USDA programs, and limited planning to ensure USDA services and benefits are provided fairly and equitably. First, regarding discrimination complaints. When the Office of the Assistant Secretary was established in 2003, one of its top priorities was to reduce the backlog and inventory of discrimination complaints that it had inherited. 4 years later, the office's progress report, entitled The First 1,000 Days, stated that the backlog had been reduced and the inventory was manageable. However, the disparities we found in the numbers USDA reported to the Congress and the public undermine the credibility of any claims. We found numerous disparities, and some of these disparities were in the hundreds. For example, in this progress report, released in July 2007, USDA reported the number of customer complaints to be 404 in its inventory at the end of fiscal year 2005. However, 1 month earlier, USDA reported to this subcommittee that the number of complaints in its inventory was 1,275. USDA qualified this number and other numbers to this subcommittee as the best available and acknowledged that they were incomplete and unreliable. USDA is aware of these issues. However, fundamentally, there appears to be a lack of management attention to resolving the backlog of complaints. For example, we would have expected routine management reports to track these cases, but we were told none are generated because they are not required by law. We're pleased to hear that Ms. McKay is now going to be requiring the sorts of reports that are intended to bring consistent management attention. Second, regarding minority participation in USDA programs. Congress required USDA to report annually on minority farmers' participation in USDA programs by race, ethnicity, and gender. USDA issued 3 reports for fiscal years 2003, 4, and 5. However, USDA disclosed that its demographic data in these reports are unreliable because they are largely based on visual observation. The drawback to visual observation is that some demographic traits may not be readily apparent to an observer. Collecting demographic data directly from program participants requires approval from the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. USDA started to seek OMB's approval to collect these data in 2004, but did not follow through because we were told of insufficient resources. According to USDA officials, they are planning future actions to obtain the necessary authority. In addition, we found the web-based supplementary data for these reports to be of limited usefulness. They are published in over 1,300 separate tables and 146 maps. This format does not facilitate analysis, such as comparing minority participation by program, location, and year. Finally, regarding planning to ensure USDA services and benefits are provided fairly and equitably. Results-oriented strategic planning provides a roadmap that clearly describes what an organization is attempting to achieve, and over time, it can communicate to the Congress and the public about what has been accomplished. While the Office of the Assistant Secretary has defined its mission and strategic goal, looking forward, stakeholders' interests should be more explicitly reflected in the planning. For example, our interviews with stakeholders informed us that their interests include assuring the diversity of the USDA county committee system and better addressing language differences, among other things. Data collection to demonstrate progress toward achieving its mission and goal is an important next step for measuring performance. A discussion on how data collected by other USDA agencies, such as the National Agricultural Statistics Service or the Economic Research Service, is especially important in an era of limited resources. Lastly, using data to identify gaps can help USDA improve performance on its civil rights efforts. For example, in 2002, GAO recommended that USDA establish time requirements for all stages of the complaint process. With these standards, along with routine management reports to track cases along the lines of what we just heard, this office can begin to troubleshoot its most problematic areas. In conclusion, USDA has been addressing allegations of discrimination for years. One lawsuit has cost taxpayers nearly $1 billion to date, and several other groups are seeking redress for similar alleged discrimination. Despite the numerous past efforts to provide USDA with constructive analysis and recommend actions for improvement, significant management deficiencies remain. Such resistance to improve its management calls into question USDA's commitment to more efficiently and effectively address discrimination complaints both within its agency and across its programs. This concludes my prepared statement, and I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Let me thank all three of you for your USDA premises when GAO was seeking to interview USDA employees as part of its review. Because GAO is an independent, nonpartisan agency that works for Congress, your department's denial of access of GAOs to records and employees also denies Congress's role in providing effective and appropriate oversight. Why was GAO told to leave USDA's offices in February of '08? Who made that decision?
I will take a crack at that question, and I would invite any information from Ms. Shanes as well. We were called by GAO in February after the situation had come to a head. And what we were told by GAO was that they had sought to interview USDA employees about some allegations that documents may have been shredded improperly or that data may have been erroneously changed. And at that time, we did not know the background on that, but we immediately saw that there was an issue. Our sense was that the allegations, if true, would potentially indicate criminal conduct. And so we felt very, very clearly that we had jurisdiction within the IG's office to look into this. So we reached out to GAO's investigative staff and decided that we would work this jointly to deal with the concerns that had been articulated by USDA's General Counsel. I think the General Counsel had two concerns. One is whether GAO's investigative staff had authority to conduct criminal investigations, and secondly, whether or not USDA employees were given the appropriate advice on their rights and responsibilities. We believe that by getting involved ourselves with GAO, that we could address those concerns on the part of the General Counsel and at the same time accommodate GAO's need to get access to the info, as well as carry out our responsibility to look into potential criminal issues. And I think we were able to successfully resolve that situation. We were able to interview the employees that were involved and to complete the work.
If my